This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. Europe, Germany are a mess. But that should not fool us, because things will change very soon. And then these new developments will bring about situations in the world which are not good news at all. But before we go into that, let me just start reading to you about the mess Europe is in. Here's an article by The Hill, dated December 20. Europe is a mess. The continent punches way below its weight in terms of its military. Germany, both Europe's greatest power and the source of many of its ills, is a case in point. Berlin long has outsourced its military policy to America, its energy policy to Russia, and its trade policy to China. Rather than serving as the engine of the European Union as a rising power, instead, Germany has been an intellectual black hole over the past generation, where every good idea for Europe's revival goes to die. Whereas the United States will spend 3.5% of its GDP on defense, only France comes close to NATO's required 2% of spending at 1.9%. In contrast, Italy will spend only 1.5%, and Germany a laughable 1.4%. The Ukraine war has done more than point out Germany's military follies. It also underlines the fact that its economic model is now broken, and nothing has yet emerged to take its place. Finally, Europe is a Tower of Babel. How could it be otherwise? There are 27 countries in the European Union. As such, the EU's policy outputs will always amount to half measures, compromises that do not genuinely solve any of its problems. Europe must face up to these festering problems, and there is simply no more time to waste. And that is exactly right, and Germany will move forward, not with 27 member states, but 10 nations or groups of nations will emerge, and they in turn will give their power and their authority to a very charismatic political, economic, and military leader, a dictator, a new Führer of German, perhaps Austrian descent. Now, let's talk about Germany's problems first, however. Deutsche Welle wrote on December 19. The German military faced yet another PR disaster on Monday, after reports emerged over the weekend that a training exercise involving one of its key weapons, the Puma tank, left not a single one operational. The new debacle comes on top of several alarming headlines in the German media recently about the state of the country's military. These suggested the Bundeswehr only has enough ammunition for 2 days of intense fighting. To make up that shortfall alone, defense experts say Germany needs to invest another 20 to 30 billion euros. There have been several stories in recent years about tanks and helicopters that needed repairing, rifles that fall and fail in hot weather, and soldiers having to train in the cold without thermal underwear. Following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced an increase in the annual defense budget, making it the largest in all of Europe, as well as a 100 billion euro special fund to modernize the military. 9 months later, some are wondering where that mountain of money is. NATO partners in northeastern Europe have already expressed concern that Germany is not a military partner to rely on in a crisis. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has upended everything. The stories about Germany's ammunition shortages emerged partially because questions were raised about maintaining supplies for the weapons Germany is sending to Ukraine. we need roughly 15 times more ammunition to ensure a sustained supply of ammunition for the weapons provided to Ukraine, while rebuilding the German armed forces at the scope required, said defense analyst Loss. Now that's very important to realize. And a new leadership, not that present, current, incompetent leadership, but a new leadership will see to it that these things will change. Because in the meantime, Europe suffered another defeat. The British paper The Telegraph wrote on December 22. Naturally, President Zelensky's appearance before Congress as a wartime leader appealing for American support has been likened to Winston Churchill's address on almost exactly the same date, in 1941. Yet by then, victory was arguably assured. Today in Ukraine, victory is far from assured. Putin could still win. Remember that. Not what many papers are telling you, that Ukraine has almost won the war. Not true at all. It goes on to say, why did Zelensky not make his address to the European Parliament in Brussels instead? The weakness of European will since February has been disgraceful. Remember when, as Russian troops massed on Ukraine's borders, several Western European countries were so terrified of antagonizing Putin that they balked at the idea of providing even small defensive-only equipment. For a time, Germany refused all arms exports, limiting military aid to 5,000 combat helmets, and doing its best to hold up weapon supplies from Eastern European NATO members. Don't believe a moment that Ukrainians don't remember that. It goes on. France, with the second largest economy in the EU, is still only the 11th largest donor in the world. Germany, meanwhile, has repeatedly failed to follow through on the commitments it eventually made. Thus, with the notable exception of brave Eastern European governments, like those of Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia, the continent's leaders have failed Ukraine. Continuing. No wonder Zelensky had far more praise for Boris Johnson than either Macron or Scholz. And who can blame him for traveling across the Atlantic first? For without British and American strategy and leadership, EU nations would almost certainly have defaulted to their habitual compromise, pressuring Zelensky into negotiations on Putin's terms. Indeed, Macron pretty much confirmed that on his recent visit to Washington, when he ridiculously spoke to NATO, making security guarantees to Russia if negotiations began, when his talk should have only have been of Russian guarantees to Ukraine. In 2022, the EU showed the world that when push comes to shove, it is nowhere to be found. Now Britain, like Zelensky, is better off staying closer to Washington than Brussels. So far, the relationship between Europe and Ukraine, and also Britain and Washington. The Bible tells you, my friends, that Russia and Ukraine will unite. However, that's going to come about. And they will become an enemy to Europe, continental Europe. And at the same time, when this new core Europe emerges under this leadership of a charismatic dictator, then Europe will become an enemy of America and Great Britain. And a nuclear war will happen with all these nations. But there is another state which is an enemy or looked upon as such, even though lip services might not agree with that, but it's really an enemy of Europe, and that is Israel, the state of Israel. I'd like to take a few moments to give you the most recent developments in that regard. Israel's 365 News reported on December 23. 40 Knesset members sent an open letter to European Union leaders on Tuesday, protesting the recently exposed EU document outlining a strategy to expand the Palestinian presence in Israeli-controlled territory in Judea and Samaria. We have learned of an official policy document of the European Union, a document the gravity of which cannot be overstated, one that leaves no room for doubt as to the one-sidedness and animosity of the EU towards the State of Israel and the Jewish people, the Knesset members wrote. Your efforts constitute an extremely grave breach of the relationship between Israel and the European Union. We have apparently mistaken, and we were apparently mistaken in thinking that racist, religious hatred of Jews and Israel was a thing of the past. It saddens us to discover time and time again that the same old blood libels can be found, along with the same flames of primitive hatred that seeks this time to persecute not the individual Jew, but the tiny Jewish state, the Knesset members wrote. And then the Jewish News Syndicate added on December 22, the EU and the Palestinian Arabs are stealing lands to which the Arabs have no entitlement. The Palestinian Authority and the EU are rapidly annexing areas surrounding Jewish towns in Judea and Samaria. The EU is in effect helping the Palestinians build a state in Judea and Samaria. Now the EU has been engulfed by revelations of a corrupt relationship with Qatar, the place where the soccer World Cup took place, the sponsor of Hamas, and mortal foe of Israel. Did you know that? And there has been a lot stated about bribery going on between Europe and, of course, Qatar, so that World Cup tournament could take place there. It goes on to say here, this access is not surprising. The EU has the desire to bring down Israel. And that is exactly what the Bible prophesies. A collaboration of the EU under German leadership and Arab nations will take place against the State of Israel to destroy it. And the Bible says that that is exactly what is going to happen. There's going to be so much animosity that a war will engulf Israel and the European Union, or I should say core Europe, under the leadership of a German dictator, will occupy the State of Israel. And that is prophesied. And we see already the tendencies here. And once this leader in Europe has arisen, all of this will drastically change. This leader will know these things have to be amended. They can't go on like that. And a mighty, powerful military, a European army, will also be established. We need to watch these things, and we need to be aware of the fact that prophecy is marching on. Thank you very much for listening. This is Norbert Link with the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by the Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.